In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. And may the peace and blessings of Allah be on His last and final messenger, Muhammad, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be unto you all. The topic of discussion is racism. And when we talk about racism, we're talking about a standard of judgment. And the standard of judgment can be in line with divine law or not. And what I'd like to talk about is the topic from an Islamic point of view, and to understand what the divine perspective is on the topic of racism and what the cures of this malady are from the Islamic context. And I'd like to start off by talking about the roots of the problem. And the roots of the problem are really go back to the beginning of creation. In fact, the problem goes back to the creation of the first man, Adam, by Allah. And when Allah created Adam, He asked the angels to prostrate to Adam. And they all did except for Iblis, except for Satan. As we see in chapter 7 verse 11 and 12 in the Quran, Iblis says that he will not prostrate to Adam. And when asked by Allah why that was the case, he said, I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay. So Satan essentially is saying that he has a superior physical composition. So his physical composition distinguished him in his mind and gave him the superiority rationale, gave him the superiority argument. Through no work of his own, he simply was created that way. And essentially, you'll see that that is the racist argument today. The racist argument is, I am better because this is how I was created. These are the innate advantages that I've been given, whether it's skin color or ethnicity or what have you. So the racist argument really boils down to a satanic argument. So racism is a manifestation of Satanism. It's a satanically inspired thought process. And you see very clearly from the Quran that the first racist argument was done by Satan, and thereafter he promised that he would instill his thought processes in mankind to the best extent possible, to the best that he can, and this is one of the ways that he manifests his influence. So we move on to verse 13 of chapter 49, and God talks about the creation of people into nations and tribes and the reasons for that. From this chapter we learn three things. Number one, we learn that the root of all creation is one. We all are different races and ethnicities, we all come from one source, one God. And the reason we've been created into nations and tribes is that we may get acquainted with one another, get to know one another. Not to boast or to take pride in ancestry and ethnicity, but to get to know one another. And to satisfy the urge for a distinguishable mention or an honorable distinction, the standard that is put forth according to divine law is one of acts of righteousness. It is through an act of righteousness. That is what distinguishes a person and raises his standard to being honorable or not, based on his actions. And it's interesting because the racist standard does not even give an opportunity for one to act. Essentially, the racist standard is equivalent to I'm making a judgment based on a superficial surface criteria. It's like saying that guy must be a really good tennis player because he has a great tennis racket. Or that guy must be a great football player because those are some great football shoes. And so the act of playing, whether it's tennis or football, is not taken into account. The decision is made based on the superficial criteria. And that is what racism essentially bases its judgments on. It bases judgment based on a surface phenomena. And clearly we see from the Quran that that is not the case. A person has to be given an opportunity to act and present their actions, because that's how God judges between people. He judges between people based on their actions. And if you recall in the previous verse that we discussed, Satan did not give Adam an opportunity to show himself. He simply judged him based on his physical composition. He said he's no good because he's made of clay and I'm made of fire, and that was the end of it as far as Satan was concerned. And that's the end of it as far as the racist argument is concerned. So clearly we see the analogy between both frames of mind and how misguided both are. So we move on, and there's some other examples in the Quran that shows that it's the acts of righteousness that distinguish between people, and how family and tribal bonds are severed. And again, the divine law, the divine standard of judgment is action. In chapter 11, verse 45, Noah, peace be unto him, asks Allah to help rescue his son. And if God was making a decision based on tribal and family ties, he would have said, well, this is Noah's son, and so I'm going to rescue his son because they're from the same tribe. Clearly, that's not the standard that Allah applied, because in verse 46 of chapter 11, God says, he is not of thy family, for his conduct is unrighteous. And so he was not saved because of his conduct. And so conduct, in this case being bad conduct, severed the tribal bond, severed the family bond. That's how God is making the judgment amongst people, not on a superficial standard that is shallow and misguided. And we also see in chapter 66 verse 11 another example, this time the wife of Pharaoh. And she believed in Moses, peace be unto him, and she was tortured as a result, and her limbs were stretched. And as she was dying, she asked Allah to build a house for her in paradise, and her wish was granted. And again, another family bond being severed, another tribal bond being severed because of the acts of the person. In this case, it's a righteous act, and so Allah chose her and chose to put her in a better place. And Pharaoh, we all know the ending of Pharaoh. It was a terrible ending because of his unrighteous conduct. And then we move on to some of the hadith, some of the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be unto him. The Prophet, peace be unto him, said, "He who calls towards tribalism is not from amongst us." That is, he is not someone that submits to divine law. He is not someone that is applying the divine standard of judgment. And he who fights on the basis of tribalism is not from amongst us, and he who dies upon tribalism is not from amongst us. So he is not someone that submits to Allah if that is the conduct that he is following. And again, in another hadith, the Prophet, peace be unto him, says that one is only a pious believer or a miserable sinner. Again, highlighting that to be a pious believer, you have to act. You have to believe and you have to act. Or you're a miserable sinner. So if you're not doing righteous deeds, you're in the category of being a miserable sinner. And that we are all the sons of Adam. We all come from the same source. And Adam came from dust. So the admonition is not to boast about ancestry, not to boast about ancestors. That was the practice of those that were living in the pre-Islamic period, where boasting about ancestry and tribal bonds was prevalent, and Islam basically came and wiped that kind of thinking away. And people who think like that are merely fuels in Jahannam, in hellfire, or they will certainly be of less account with Allah than the beetle which rolls dung with its nose. I mean, to make an analogy with the beetle rolling dung with its nose, that's how insignificant the racist point of view is in the divine perspective. It is really a completely pathetic standard, and it's likened to a beetle rolling dung with its nose. I mean, imagine if on the day of judgment a white person goes to Allah and says, you know, I'm a white person, so I deserve to go to paradise. Or a black person goes and says, oh God, oh Allah, I'm a black person and I deserve to go to paradise. Clearly, that is an absurd standard for one to have salvation or not. So clearly, the standard is a standard of conduct. It's a standard of action, not a standard of exterior, superficial standards. Again, you know, I mean, it's like saying someone is going to be a great manager for this company because he wears a beautiful tie, or because he has this great suit on. Again, that is the superficial standard, essentially, that a racist would apply. And clearly, it's absurd to think that way. Islam is saying one needs to be given an opportunity to act. And nowadays we see many people that judge people, are very quick to judge people before they even act, before given an opportunity to act, present themselves and present what they're all about. We're seeing people judged not only on their physical appearances. People can be judged on their names. So again, a far cry from the divine standard, which mandates that a person be judged on their deeds, on their actions, versus the satanic standard, which is we'll just judge because I am superior because of some superficial exterior standard. In the case of Satan, saying that he was created from fire and Adam was created from dust, and essentially that makes him better. So finally, the Quran offers a formula for universal brotherhood. And in chapter 8, verse 63, Allah says, and moreover, He hath put affection between their hearts, between the hearts of believers, and even if you spent all that is in the earth, you would not have produced that affection, but Allah has done it, for He is exalted in might and wise. Basically, we can put all kinds of laws to try and curtail racism and racist tendencies and ethnic tendencies and all that kind of effort. But the hearts our hearts that are disjointed will always find a way to disunite. And so racism always finds a way to manifest its ugly head and wreak the havoc that it wreaks. But Islam is saying that through faith in Allah, through faith in the Almighty, and doing acts of righteousness, any person from any ethnicity can have a brotherhood with any other person from any other ethnicity. So Islam rises above race and rises above ethnicity, and basically judges between people based on their faith in their Creator and their actions and their deeds. That's why a white person can have universal brotherhood with a black person or a brown person or a yellow person or whatever kind of person based on the standard of divine faith and acts of righteousness. That is the Islamic prescription for curing this remedy. And so I ask Allah to guide us all to that which is in our best interest and to see the divine light. And with that, I leave you with the blessings of Islam, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be unto you all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.